Uh-oh. Yeah. So it's been a while since I've done a video for you guys. Sorry about that. It's been quite the year with everything that's been going on with the pandemic and everything. But yeah. So the last video I shot, I was talking about the drivetrain, and we were doing the break-in. Finished the break-in, and everything was great with the drivetrain. Like no complaints whatsoever. It's all sitting down here actually right now. So, as you probably can tell, there was an issue, and it's honestly it's an issue that I've been fighting and trying to figure out for years. Only just figured out what was going on with the car. So the car has suffered from a phantom misfire for a long time, and I couldn't figure out what was going on with it. So as it turns out, well, I'll give you some info on what was happening first. So the car boosted great, made great power, but 4,000 to 4,500 RPM, sometimes as high as 5,000 RPM. I always had this little stutter, and you could feel it in the pedal, and it just didn't feel right. And for the life of me, I could not figure out what was going on. I mean, I built a new wiring harness because I thought, well, maybe I've got bad signal with the cam sensor, the crank sensor. I put an oscilloscope on them. Everything looked fine. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I mean, I built a coil-on plug kit. I thought maybe it's just weak spark. I changed a bunch of stuff in my fuel system. I thought, well, maybe it's just not getting fuel at that. There had to be some quirk that was causing this misfire. So, so I've been kind of doing little things here and there for years trying to figure out what was causing it. And it just seemed like it was way more effort than it should have taken. It seemed to me there had to be something fairly big wrong somewhere, but I couldn't figure out where the problem was. So fast forward, we get the driveline done, and I'm doing the break-in, and this was actually July 4th when it started getting, when it finally came to a head. The weeks leading up to July 4th, I started getting knock counts on my knock gauge, and it started getting worse and worse. I mean, it started out, 5, 6 counts of knock, and then it started going, and mind you, this is out of boost. So I couldn't figure out, I'm like, well, what in the world's causing this knock? Maybe it's phantom knock, maybe something's loose, maybe there's a bracket somewhere that's not bolted down. So I started going through the bay. I couldn't figure out anywhere where I was getting phantom knock. So I redid the exhaust. I tried a ton of things to try to figure out what was causing this problem. So and it just kept getting worse. There at the end, 3,000 RPM with 10% throttle, in vacuum, it was getting 40 counts of knock, and I'm just like, man, what in the world is causing this? Something's going on. So, but it still drove fine. Like there was no indication that there was a problem. It just was getting high knock counts. So I actually thought, well, maybe my knock sensor's going bad. But no, it actually, there was a major problem. So July 4th, I decided to take this to a buddy's house. They're having a July 4th party, so we go over there with this, and I just wanted to be there, and I didn't really, I knew it was running poorly. So I thought, well, I'll take this just so that, we can be there in the cool car. Not that the WRX isn't, but, it's stock. This is built. Everybody always likes seeing this. So I thought, well, we'll take this to the party, and yeah, we'll just drive it over there and then drive it home and just see what happens. And I actually took the exhaust off of it too, because I wanted to hear the open downpipe sound, one, and two, I thought, well, if it is a phantom knock issue that has something to do with the exhaust, removing it is going to eliminate that as a factor. So we'll do that to test and see if we still get knock. So 15-minute drive over there, it was fine. Got it to their house, it died in the driveway. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we'll just deal with it when the time comes to leave. So enjoyed fireworks and everything, and time comes to leave, it fires up fine. I get about halfway home, and then it just starts sputtering, and finally it dies out, and I'm like, what in the world's going on with this? And I think we died out like 3 times. I had to constantly give it gas just to keep the thing running. It's like, man, what is wrong with this thing? But it was starting to become a little bit more evident what was going on at that point. So it started using a lot of oil. I think that 15-minute drive, we burned almost a quart. And at that point, I was like, okay, it's a rings issue. So unfortunately, yeah, we started losing compression, started losing ring seal, and started getting tons of blow by. So I thought, okay, well, this has probably been the issue the whole time. So I decided, well, okay, let's pull this motor out and tear it down and see what's going on. So that's what I have taken care of over the last couple of weeks. The car has been apart for about 3 months now. And just today, I took the block in to be honed, and discovered actually quite a bit of issue when I got this thing apart. Now, none of it's like major. A lot of it was expensive, but I've got the parts now, and we're going to be getting started on this hopefully here in just a couple of weeks. So when I did the build initially, so keep in mind, this was my first ever engine build. So, I didn't know everything that I needed to know. And I learned a lot since building that engine. So when I built the engine, I did everything very old school. I made assumptions on my piston to wall clearance because I was told, yeah, this block is dead on factory spec. Your pistons are dead on factory spec. So I thought, in my inexperienced mind, I thought, oh, well, it's probably fine. So I'll just do the assembly. And then when I did the oil clearances, I used plasti gauge, which, it's fine. But these engines run somewhat tight clearance. It's 2000s oil clearance for the mains and the rods, as I recall. But it's fine. There are some things I did like that were fine, and then there was other things like not measuring the bore and the pistons that weren't. So and even if I had known to do those things, I didn't have the tools at the time. So this time around, when I got the engine apart, I thought, well, since I gained a lot of knowledge on doing these builds, I thought, well, the first thing I'm going to check is my piston to wall clearance. And so that's what I did. So I've got my old pistons here, and I'll show you what I found when I got this engine apart. So the wrist pins, everything was fine. The rods are fine. The rods can be reused. However, all 4 of my pistons came out pretty scuffed and burned. So, immediately when I pulled it apart, I'm like, oh, yep, okay. Suspicions confirmed. So the problem that I've been dealing with for all these years has been piston slap. And it causes the rings to not seal properly, and it would only do it at that specific rev range from 4,000 to about 5,000 RPM. So, and it would do it at idle when it was cold, because I could hear it. Now, I didn't know what I was hearing, and I think I was maybe one of the only people who actually heard it, and I was like, man, something just doesn't sound right. But everybody who I had listened to it's like, no, I don't hear anything, everything sounds fine. Well, this is what I was hearing, was the pistons slapping in the bores. So what was happening was, instead of the piston going straight up and down, it was doing this. And over time, that wore through the skirt coating, and it wore into the aluminum and burned the aluminum up. So that was a pretty big issue, but I'm glad it happened, and I'll say why here in just a second. So when I did, when I saw this, I thought, okay, well, you know, if I'm going to build another one of these, I need to make sure I've got the right tools to do this time. So I bought a set of Mitutoyo micrometers, 0 to 4 inch. I bought a Starrett dial bore gauge and a set of Starrett T gauges. And for as soon as those things came in, I measured my piston and I measured my cylinder walls. And what I got was 8.5 thousandths of piston to wall clearance. For those of you who know 4G63s, you know that is twice the limit. And, well, almost twice the limit. It's twice what it should be. 4 thousandths is really where you want it. Wiseco specifies 3.5 thousandths. Most people I've talked to say that that's too tight. So when I dropped the new pistons off and the block off today at the machine shop, I told them I wanted 4 thousandths piston to wall clearance. So I did get new pistons, but I'm glad this all happened because, so some of you guys know when I did this build, I pretty much built the engine with aftermarket parts. I had a head casting and I had a block casting, and that was pretty much what I started with. Because my original engine was crank walked really, really badly. So I didn't want to buy a factory crank, and I wanted to do a 2.3 liter. So what I did was I bought this crankshaft, which this is a Manley forged 100 millimeter crankshaft. Now, if you are in the know and you're looking at this, you're probably thinking in your head, "Oh boy!" And sure enough, this crankshaft, when I pulled the engine apart and inspected it. Now, when I bought this crankshaft, you know, there wasn't really a lot of reviews on it yet. Nobody had really used it much, but now a lot of information has come out that these had a lot of issues with cracking. And sure enough, when I pulled this apart, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera here or not. Let's try to see if I can get it in there. But the number 4 rod journal, there's a crack right there that you can kind of see right here. So this crankshaft is just like all the other ones, it cracked. So I'm actually not super upset that this engine failed, because at least not in the way that it did, because if this had actually broken, that would have been significantly more of an issue. So because I got this apart and I found this was cracked, that's really saved me from windowing the block. That would have ruined the block. It would have ruined obviously the crank. It would have ruined the rods. You know, that would have really, really been the end of that. So, you know, this way at least, all I had to do was replace the crankshaft and replace the pistons. My rods are all still fine. The rod bolts are ARP 625 plus bolts. You pretty much don't ever have to replace those. I also bought a bolt stretch gauge, so instead of torquing the rod bolts down, this time I can use a stretch gauge, which would be nice. So yeah, this second time around is going to be quite the improvement to this engine. So because these 2.3 liter cranks or 2.4 liter cranks crack so much, I decided that this time around I'm going to build a 2 liter. I just don't want to deal with the problems that the 100 millimeter cranks have. The reason that they do, so if you look here, the end of this journal here and the start of this main journal, there's no overlap. This is completely below this. With the 88 millimeter cranks, there's some overlap here, and that overlap really adds to the overall strength of the crankshaft. I did a bunch of research before I made a purchase, as I usually do, and I ended up going with an Eagle forged 88 millimeter. I had heard a lot of really bad things about Eagle's products, but I've also heard from English Racing that they pretty much never get have braking issues with those cranks. So I thought, well, if Lucas English swears by it, I think I can probably swear by it as well. So we'll give it a try and see how it lasts. I don't anticipate having any problems with it. So yeah, the new build, we're getting rid of this Manley 100mm forged crank, and we're putting in an Eagle forged 88mm crank. The new pistons are the same, Wiseco 1400 HDs, but instead of the 2.3 liter piston with the short skirt, I have the 2 liter pistons. So there's a little bit more skirt material on this. The wrist pin is, I believe, 6mm lower. That should really help me with piston slap issues. This time around, I'm really going for longevity with the build. So I really don't want to have to tear this motor apart again anytime soon. I'd like to see at least 10 years. Better get more than 10,000 miles out of it. I got 20,000 miles out of this engine. So and it should have gone for a lot more than that. I anticipate getting twice that or more out of this new setup. I'm really hoping to see like 50,000 miles with no issues. So yeah, 1400 HD pistons for the 2 liter for the new one, and I did go with 10,000, or I did go 10 over on the new one. So I didn't actually need to bore the block. But it does need a hone because the cylinder walls have some flat spots at the top from the piston slap issue. So, but no real bore damage to speak of, thankfully. Piston slaps, it's an issue, but it's not that big of an issue. Over time, obviously, it can be, but that's generally every Subaru out there does that. So, it is what it is. But I think this new setup is going to be a lot stronger. Yeah, so this time around, I'm also balancing the rods and balancing the piston assemblies. Before, I just matched the heaviest piston with the lightest rod and vice versa. And honestly, it was great. Like, I didn't have any balance issues with the engine at all. But I bought a scale this time, so I'm going the new crank, the Eagle crank, is at the machine shop right now. I dropped it off today as well. They're going to spin it up and make sure that it is perfectly balanced, and then I will be balancing the piston and rod assemblies myself. And then yeah, so with this engine, this old engine, I actually had some high oil pressure issues too. I was getting 90 psi plus at cold revs, and at even hot revs it was up near 90. So this time around, I'm changing my bearings setup up. So before, I used Cosworth bearings, which were great, honestly. Like, those things are amazing, especially with that cracked crankshaft. They held up really well. They don't even look all that bad. It's a little dark out here, so I don't know that you'll really be able to see it well, but there's some scuffing, but nothing that I wouldn't expect from a 20,000 mile engine. It's obvious a little trash has gone through these, so but it's not bad. The thrust bearings look great, no real issues there. So yeah, I think the new bearing setup, I'm probably going to be going with King XP bearings, and I'm going to get their, was it, I can't remember if it's 10, yeah, I think it's 10 thousandths extra oil clearance ones to try to help lower the oil pressure in the engine. And I think that'll be a good upgrade, and I think I'm going to end up getting their coated ones as well. So I think it's PMAX black coating or something like that. So we'll see. I'm not sure if bearing coating is really like a huge deal for these, but I think I'm going to go ahead and try it just to see. But everything else here, this is only a 20,000 mile engine. I don't need to redo the oil pump. I'm just going to put it right back on. It's great. And everything's pretty solid for this. I'm going to change, I don't have to, but I'm going to change my timing belt and timing kit and tensioner anyway, just because it's easy to do with the engine out of the car. Yeah, so as soon as I get this back, as soon as I finish balancing the piston assemblies and the rod assembly, yeah, it's pretty much just going to be throw it back together, and yeah, should be good. So I'm glad that I was able to at least get through the break-in on the transmission and transfer case and the clutch. So, you know, I can focus on doing my engine break-in, and I won't have to worry about putting stress on these parts as well, because, you know, with a drivetrain, you break it in driving it easy. With an engine, you kind of need to seat the rings with some higher revs and one or two pulls within the first, you know, 20 miles or so to try to help seat the rings, and then after that it's a little bit more easy driving, but driving through the rev range. With these, you're supposed to not go over 3,000 RPM, so it's just best when you don't have to do both of those things at the same time. So yeah, we'll get those together. I'm debating, I'm not sure yet, but I'm debating on upgrading the turbocharger as well in the spring. I don't know that I'm even going to put that 20G back on there. The cylinder head, I've already finished cleaning up, and it's all reassembled for the most part. I still need to Permatex the end caps that need it, so this one and these two, and I need to replace the cam seals. But everything here was great. I had to replace two rockers with ones from my stash because there was maybe one or two money shifts in there. Not can't confirm or deny. But, you know, these things get hammered pretty bad. And let's see if I can make the, yeah, you can see there's a mark on that one. So anytime you can feel the mark on that valve surface, it's best to replace them. And then I had another one that had a line on the needle bearing roller, so I replaced two of those. But I'm also doing a lot of upgrades to this engine while it's apart. Nothing really for power, just, you know, things that are going to make life easier. So I'm finally eliminating the thermostat water lines. I've tapped and put a cap fitting on the thermostat housing, and where this one was, you get a fitting like this. This one's chewed up because I'm getting ready to do the same thing to this head. This fitting here you have to eliminate, but you can't do that because this is a thin steel fitting. So what I did was I removed that fitting. It's just a barb. You can work it out of the cylinder head. It just takes a lot of patience and frustration. And then I tapped this. I forget which size NPT that is. And then I put this NPT to 8AN fitting in. So my heater core lines are going to be AN when I put this back together, which will be nice. But yeah, that eliminates that fitting as well. So just, you know, just to have that little loop hose out of the bay, it's just little things to help clean up the engine bay overall, will be really nice. So, but yeah, other than that, everything's pretty much just going right back together. Nothing really needs any major work beyond the engine needing a hone. It doesn't need to be decked. The deck surface is fine. The deck surface on this cylinder head is fine. It wasn't over-torqued. It was never overheated. So, you know, it's flat. And I can verify I've got a machinist's square that I've ordered here. And you can, Jaffra's got a video on the deck of these cylinder heads and how to measure them. I think if you can fit a, oh man, I can't remember what size feeler gauge. I think 2/1000 is the service limit. If there's more than 2/1000 of an inch of flex across the cylinder head, this way, any of this way, or any of this way, then it needs to be decked. And I think it's 1.5 thousandths If you can fit 1.5 thousandths feeler gauge, then you really probably should have it resurfaced, but I don't think it needs it. Everything looks really good. I cleaned the valves, and I completely tore the cylinder head down, cleaned it, and lapped the valves back in. This is basically a new head, so should be good to go there. New flywheel bolts. And that other cylinder head, that's that Kia cylinder head that we got from the pull yard, because we picked up another car here. This is my wife's new project car. This is a 2003 Galant, and it is a 2.4 liter 4G64. We're just going to do a real basic build on it. Whenever my Evo's done, I'll probably throw H-beam rods and a cheap set of pistons in this thing, and then throw this cylinder head on it and my 20G, and we'll see if we can make 500 wheel horsepower at the front wheels with that Galant, and that'll be a nice little cruiser for her. So, but yeah, anyway, so right now the priority is to get the Evo back together so I can get the mess in my garage cleaned up. It looks messy, but everything is actually pretty well organized out here. And then I'm going to be doing some other upgrades at the same time to the car. So this is all fuel system stuff. I am ditching the twin pump setup that I had, where I had a pump on each side of the tank, here and one here. So it was a twin 255 setup, which worked great. Like, there was no problems with that setup, but there was an issue. It wasn't with the fueling specifically, but the fuel gauge didn't work right. So I've kind of gotten sick of not knowing exactly where my fuel is. So I decided I'd go back to a single pump setup and put the pickup back on the other side for the Venturi. We're going to do a radium adjustable Venturi valve, and I'm planning on putting one of the Hellcat, I think 540 liter per hour fuel pumps in this car. This already got 8AN hard line up to the front and 5/16 or 6AN return, so the fuel lines won't be an issue. We'll just, like I said, we'll just throw that pump in here and should be good to go. But yeah, so lots of little things like that happening. But I suspect this car should be ready for next season without too much trouble. I was really hoping to be able to focus on the final 5% stuff. This car hasn't had a bumper on it in years. I really, really want to get that front bumper painted so I can get it put on here, but this engine failure is kind of throwing a wrench in that, just because it's not cheap to do a build. The crankshaft and the pistons were expensive. Bearings are not particularly cheap when you buy coated ones. Stuff like that. So gasket sets, $350. Then all the timing stuff is another $350, $400. So it adds up real quick. But I think it'll be worth it. Me, without having hardly any knowledge or experience, just what I've learned from the internet and from reading magazines and books over the years. My first engine build lasted for 5 years and 20,000 miles. So now that I know a little bit better what I'm doing, I think this engine setup's going to last a lot better, and I'm building it for strength and longevity more than torque. So I think it'll be, and not that it's going to be lacking in that department. I think with the turbo that I'm planning on running, I'm planning on getting an FP Black with the Zona rotor ball bearing housing on it. So I'm going to shoot for, I think, about 700 to 750 all-wheel horsepower with a fully built 2-liter. And I think that's doable. So we'll see, if Adriana Noonan can run a high 8, I think she ran with that turbo. I think I can, get a high 9 out of a moderately tuned street car with the 85. So we'll see. But anyway, I just wanted to get you guys an update. I've had some people commenting on some of my older videos like, hey, what's up? Where have you been? What happened? Is the car running? I'm like, no. But, you know, that's race cars. It's all good. We'll get it built up again and should be good to go. So, but anyway, that's all I got for you guys for now. It's going to be at least 2 weeks before I get my block and crank and pistons back to do any more work to this. So in the meantime, I've got to order my bearings and I've got to get my rod balancing done. So yeah, it's going to be a long, slow process, but hopefully I'll have another video for you guys here in another couple of months with a completed engine. So yeah, stay tuned, I guess. Anyway, hope y'all are doing well and staying safe with this crazy year. And yeah, I guess stay tuned. See you guys next time.